Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be reviewing Joymashers Retro-flavored action platformer, Oniken. Find out if I thought this game made the cut, or if it felt more appropriately like Oni can't. Are you a bad enough dude to take on the evil Oniken army? Apparently, as the mysterious mercenary Zaku, you actually are, since you're literally depicted as a one-man militia throughout the game. Surprisingly enough, for an old-school styled action platformer, Oniken can feel a bit story-dense at times, as there's a fair bit of expository dialogue to set up the overarching narrative as well as introduce the raison d'etre for every mission you end up going out on, as well as detailing the overall end result of your righteous rampages. That said, I found it to be fairly endearing, given the game plays out with a semi-serious tone, as though it were the bizarre love child of NES Ninja Gaiden and Fist of the North Star, which just ends up lending it a fairly campy charm instead. Also because I found the dramatic stares and accompanying poses alongside its sense of theatrics to be so shonen it hurts. But like, in a hurts so good way. Mechanically, Oniken is a straightforward enough experience, with a relatively small amount of abilities for a discerning player to master. Though, I'll admit that whilst I did figure out the basics of jumping, slashing, and hucking grenades at people by pressing up an attack, it wasn't until the penultimate level that I discovered that you could berserk in very specific situations, mostly because there's no tutorial and you're expected to read the game's digital manual. I can't recall the last time I felt this way, but it was likely when I had an NES. Read the manual, folks. Still, whilst it was a neat discovery, it mostly amounted to a bit of convenience, since again, it's situational and hinges on acquiring a power-up that deteriorates when you get hit. And, well, odds are you're probably going to get hit a lot. Like, Oniken is genuinely a challenging title, jam-packed with vicious enemy arrangements across obstacle-laden stages, and culminating in a number of diverse bosses to challenge in each mission. Though it starts out accessible enough in regards to its difficulty, it didn't take me too long to discover that it ramps up noticeably between its various stages, growing increasingly ruthless and dickish in both its enemy placement as well as the devilish nature of its hazards and instant death pits. To be fair, I really should expect that from platformers. I just keep forgetting that that's a thing. Thankfully, Oniken handles rather nicely, so it ended up feeling like my fault, really, when I yeeted myself into the void. Mostly. I cursed at the enemies sometimes. Now, I did find myself relishing the process of playing and learning the various missions, and coming face to face with the arrays of boss it had to offer. What I really didn't look forward to was the process of dying. See, a part of the reason is that when you're on a given stage, should you die, you will be sent back to the start. Not to the start of the mission, mind you, but of the particular sub-stage of that mission which you're on, and there's always 3. What this ended up resulting is that while I was in the process of learning a boss's patterns, the stage itself ended up feeling akin to busy work by the end of my, education. Mission 5, final boss, I'm looking at you, by the way. That said, this happens to be compounded by a secondary element. See, whilst you're only kicked back to the start of the stage when you die normally, you also happen to have a limited number of lives, 3 in fact, with a potential 4th life hidden in most stages. Not that those extra lives roll over into future missions, mind you. Now, if you happen to expend all your lives, you get punted to the very beginning of the mission, which results in a fair amount of tedium. Though I was grateful that the game replenished my health between stages to avoid super cheap deaths. I also really like that while the game is relatively linear in its levels, I could resume playing older ones or challenging the one I was currently on at the drop of a hat, which made the process of revisiting a level I really enjoyed for funsies or the sake of an achievement highly convenient. Still, given my penchant for accidentally falling to my abrupt demise, and simply my raw talent for getting my shit pushed in by the Mission 5 boss, I do find it unlikely that I'd be able to properly challenge Oniken's hard mode, which challenges you to clear the entirety of the game with a single freaking life. Not my particular pick of poison, given I managed to screw up clearing the first level without dying, by falling into a bottomless pit at full health right near the end. Get through the entire game without flubbing once? It'd be doable, eventually, so I'm a pass. Now, I'll admit that I wasn't really blown away by Oniken's soundtrack. While it wasn't bad and does fit the overall tone of the stages, they also completely failed to leave any sort of lasting impression on me. Sort of like the equivalent of action movie-oriented elevator music. Now, graphically, I rather like this game. There was a lot of variety in environmental designs, as well as the enemy and boss designs, allowing for a lot of diversity in the forces you encounter, and a number of the actual animations provide some lovely tells for when you're about to go and get murdered. Murdered is the word. And the scenes that crop up during the story segments are pretty great to watch, since they tend to play out like animated comic books in all their cheesy shonen glory. So let's tally up my final thoughts of the matter, shall we? Overall, I have to say that Oniken is a digestible retro game that manages to do a good job of harkening back to the NES era of gaming. Considering my recent experiences with retro-inspired title Citadel, Oniken was like a breath of fresh air, providing much more enjoyable and varied stages to conquer. And I enjoyed the over-the-top drama that was its story. And like I said, there's some fairly solid visual appeal to boot, even if it does lack oomph in the audio department. That being said, being punted back to the beginning of the stage and then an entire level over and over again did end up as one of the most notably irritating aspects of Oniken, as it ended up turning otherwise short levels that hadn't overstayed their welcome into irritating slogs. While Citadel did a number of things wrong altogether, the ability to restart and practice at a boss over and over again was something I appreciated a great deal. Which is probably why I ultimately ended up coming away from the game with the personal feeling that it wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't a terrible way to spend an afternoon, but there were distinctly points in time where I found myself detesting the rinse-repeat process of navigating 3 stages of a mission so I could try my hand at its final boss. Screw you again, Mission 5. Notably, the difficulty spike that comes with the layer missions in tandem with that feature made for an incredibly frustrating time, which is why I ultimately came away feeling that it was a fumble for me. Something that I'd likely only recommend to people who were avid fans of that era and genre of gaming. Because, quite frankly, if that is the sort of thing that you have been looking for, Oniken does it quite well. It's just not my cup of tea, as I said. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And for those interested in more indie reviews, developer interviews, podcasts, or a Monday TTRPG content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord. You can click the link in the banner or the description to become a part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. Lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel, we do have a Ko-fi running now to help supplement funds for our lovely editor Jack, and also to make sure that we can continue to provide quality content and not starve to death in the meantime. Again, check the description and the banner for dem links. Anywho, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.